In this video, we're going to continue modeling our tank. There's not a whole lot left, as this is a pretty simple model, but there's a lot of little things that we need to pay attention to. And first of all, just for the sake of organization, I'm going to change the outliner here a little bit, where I'm going to take the camera, drag that over to the scene collection, and then take all of our objects that we've modeled so far, holding Shift to select all of these, drag them up into collection number 1, and just rename this tank. And that will just make me feel better and feel like it's more organized, and we can hide all of these things at once. And we can get a little bit more granular once we've solidified exactly what objects we need. But for now, just calling them all tank will work just fine. We can hide that camera as we won't need it for a while, and we can get back to modeling. So a few things right off the bat. First of all, I want to change this main portion of the body a little bit, as I want to pull this front part back. I really like how some of these tanks have angled fronts, where it's angled at the bottom, of course, so it can roll over rocks and stuff, but I also like it how it's angled here at the top as well. I think that looks really cool. However, I don't like this really sharp one edge transition here. That's a bit too sharp. So what I'm going to do is add in another edge loop right in here, and so that way it'll look a little bit more beveled. Now, that's a little bit too high, so I will select all of these guys. Whoops, not that edge. Let's pull this down. And I'm kind of centering that right along where this top part of the tread is, facing mostly forward. So that's looking good, though it's a bit too forward. So let's select these three faces here and pull them back so that they're well within the boundary of the tread. Same thing here, I will select all of these faces and just pull them in ever so slightly, about the same amount, and we can reevaluate whether or not these are lined up correctly. I think they are. Okay, so now let's select this top edge here. Box selected to select both vertices, and let's pull this back. Let's do another 45-degree angle. I think that would look good. And while you can turn on overlays and edge angle and face angle, honestly, sometimes you just have to do the math, and I find it easier to just duplicate a face or edge, rotate that 45 degrees, scale that up, and this way we can get pretty darn close without having to do any math. And then I'll just go ahead and delete that. So I think that looks a bit better, and maybe we want a bit more room here in the front, so I'll pull this back. Like so, that's looking good. And the back I want sloped as well. So I'll Alt-A, deselect everything, pull this back. Though I want it to be one large slope. Well, I'm trying to decide how large I want this flat part in the back to be, but I think that looks pretty good. Alright, so let's see what another 45-degree angle looks like. I'll select this, Shift-D, rotate 45, hit the negative, scale that up, and match that in, and that looks pretty good. Well, that doesn't look good. Let's delete that. Okay. Yeah, that looks fine. Cool. So we will need to move this part up. You can see how all of this is pretty much just a balancing act and lots of small little tweaks. Let's move this forward a bit. And overall, that feels a bit more balanced to me. I think it just looks a bit better. We can see the height looks pretty good. I might want to bring this up just a little bit. So select all of these, go into edit mode, and that way I can select everything right in here. Hit G and Z, pull this up a little bit because this is kind of an exaggerated, cartoony tank, so I want to make it a little bit more plump, I guess. I want to make it seem almost like a friendly tank, like it's just fun. I don't know. Tanks are not inherently fun, so we gotta do something to make it seem like that it is. Now I pull these a little bit more forward here. Okay, that looks good. Now we can take the barrel and probably pull this back just a touch. Rotate around this quite a bit just to make sure that things are feeling balanced from every angle. And I believe I need to make the barrel a little bit fatter just to exaggerate this a little bit more. So I'm going to Alt select this edge ring here, hit Alt S, and scale that up like so. And what I will do, instead of adding just this little bump on the end, I don't really know what to call that, but instead of just having it kind of grow larger just at the end, what I will do is delete those vertices, select this edge loop, hit Shift D, Y, snap that over here, like so, select everything, Control V, there we go, remove double vertices, Shift N to recalculate normals, and that way it's exactly the same width as the barrel behind it. I can select this edge loop, extrude that out along the Y-axis, so it looks like this is just clamped on top of it. Hit E to extrude, scale that down, extrude that inwards along the Y-axis, and then just hit F to fill. And we don't need it to go too far back. That will just kind of waste texture space, but enough that we won't likely see it from, up here. Alright, so that looks good, though a little bit too elongated. So let's select everything. Gonna make this a snub-nosed tank. That's probably not a thing, but it is now. But what I also want to do is add a little guard, as if it's intended to block some of the shells that are coming at it. So what I'm going to do is hit Shift A, add in a plane, rotate this 90 degrees along the X, move this up, though I want it to be exactly in the middle, so I'll hit Shift S, cursor to center, Shift S, selection to cursor, and I'll just pull that up like so, tap into edit mode, scale that down, and let's make it about that big. Scale it along the X-axis, like so, and then I will add a solidify modifier. Pull that up, and I want to angle the ends of this away as if it's meant to deflect bullets or shells. So I'll take the top edge here, extrude this about 45 degrees, like so. Same with these edges. I'll select both of those, hit E to extrude along the Y-axis, and I'll actually snap those along the Y-axis to this point here, and then scale them along the X to get about a 45-degree angle again. And you can tell when you're almost exactly at a 45-degree angle because the aliasing will be gone a little bit. You can see that if I'm less than that, maybe you can't tell in the video, but it's definitely a little bit aliased. But if you scale it to just about 45 degrees, you should get no aliasing at all. So it's very, very faint, but it's something that you can pick up on over time. Maybe scale this down just a bit, like so. Pull this back. Okay, that's looking pretty interesting. I like that. Now I think we need a hole here because it looks like it's just cutting straight through. So I will take the middle face here, hit I to inset, and try to center this with the barrel there, and just delete that face. I'll scale this along the Z. Okay, I think that gives us a more interesting shape here. to work with, though it's still a little bit boxy. So I will take this top edge, scale S 0.5, and I'll do the same thing with each of these, S and 0.5, to scale it down to half. That'll give us more angles, and that looks pretty cool. I'll also check in the solidify modifier even thickness, and that way this center here won't get quite as pinched. It'll retain volume a little bit better. And I still want to be able to see this cool angle that we have right in here. So let's select all of these faces, see what happens if we pull it back from side view. I still think that should be forward a little bit. So let's leave that about there and then pull this object forward like so. So we can still see that something's going on, and it looks pretty cool from the back. Maybe that's a bit too forward. It has to look like it's far enough back, because if we push it too forward, then it looks kind of useless, or like it'll just be heavy. Though that looks kind of interesting as well. Decisions. Alright, well I think the armor should be closer to the body, right about there. So let's go with that. So now that we have that, let's refine this main part of the turret that rotates on top of the body. And I think it needs to be a little bit thicker. Like so, that looks better. And I want to give it a couple bevels because right now it's a little bit too harsh. And it's also the most predominant piece of this because we're going to be looking at this from the top. So we're going to really notice that these are very harsh lines. So what I'll do is start to bevel some of these. For example, I'll take this back edge here, select both of these, hit Control B, bevel that out just a bit. And we can also then take these edges and pull them in just a touch so that they're not too close. Then I will also take this entire top face, maybe minus that edge, Control B to bevel, and that way we're not messing up the perfect flatness of this here in the front. Control B to bevel. That looks pretty good. Though now we can notice that these angles here are not lining up. And while they don't have to line up, there's no rule that says they do. I think it just looks more pleasing. So let's scale these along the Z-axis. Scale this one along the X. Alright, that looks close enough. Maybe scale the entire thing down a bit. Like so. This top here is probably a bit too thick. Alright, that's looking cool. So now let's look at some of these other pieces here. I think we can bevel this box. And again, I'm really not worrying about n-gons at the moment because it's all going to be converted to triangles anyway. So it's all about just speed of modeling. And as long as it's easily changeable, then we're all good. Okay, so with that, then we can take these guys and move them inwards a bit, just because they're not quite balanced from the front because of that bevel. Let's bring them up. Whoops. Let's bring both of those edges down a bit. All right. That's looking better. Now, I would also like to bevel part of this back area of the tank. And the way that I will do that is just to select all of these faces here. An easy way to do that is just select one, Shift G, and select coplanar, and then it'll select everything that's on a flat plane with that. Now, if I hit Control B right now, it'll bevel all of those edges that I have selected, and I don't want that. So I'll temporarily make this a n-gon by hitting F, and then hitting Control B, but I don't want the top to be beveled. So I will deselect this top edge, hit Control B. That gives us an interesting shape on the top as well as around the sides, like so, and that helps it meet those wheels a little bit better. It doesn't look like such an immediate transition, or it doesn't look quite as harsh. And then I can take these inside faces. Well, I need to extrude this into the wheel a little bit, but if I select this face, I don't want to extrude this top portion. So instead, I'm going to select this vertex on the left, and I need something that's lining up with it on the right. And there isn't one, so I'll hit Control R, add in a new edge loop, hit SZ in 0 to flatten that out, pull this up along the Z-axis, and then snap it to that vertex there. Now we have two that are in line. I can select both of them and hit J to connect them. So I guess now that I look at it, it's a little bit too high. We need it to be below. So maybe a better one would be these vertices here. So I will select that one and that one, hit J to connect. And since this one is already on a flat plane, it's not really doing anything. It doesn't matter whether we move it up or down. Then I can snap this along the Z-axis, exactly the same height as that one. Now I can select this face and just extrude that into the wheel. So it looks like it's connected. Just a few more details, and I think we should be pretty set. I'd like to add a cylinder to the back here just to give this a more interesting shape other than a box. So I'll place my 3D cursor there, hit Shift A, add that cylinder. I don't think we need 16. Let's go 12, because it'll be a little bit smaller. Rotate this 90 degrees, tab into edit mode, scale that down. And if we hit Control 1, we can see this from the back view. And this can maybe be where they store the fuel or something else. Maybe drums of ammo. Either way, I'll line it up around the halfway point. Scale that up and move this back. Maybe line it up with this edge loop on this object. Snap that there. Then we can pull this in along the Y-axis, like so. And I'll hold off on deleting anything until we get to more of a final stage. I don't quite like how that lines up. I think I will pull this back in instead. There we go. I think that looks better. But we can hit W and shade smooth, and then go to Edge Data, Normals, and choose Auto Smooth. Crank this up to like 75 or something. And that way it'll look more round, but we still have that hard edge right on the face there. And let's do the same thing for both of these. Let's hit W, Smooth Shading. For this one, Auto Smooth, let's change that to 75. Same thing here, Auto Smooth. And I guess we don't really need to change this one since it's already smoothed correctly. We can change that later if need be. Now there are just two more details that I want to add. One of them is a little plate here on the back because I think it's a little bit boring and we're going to be seeing this tank from the back a decent amount. So let's go ahead and add something a little bit more interesting. I'll select all of these faces here, hit I to inset, and then B to turn on or turn off boundary. And then I'll just hit E to extrude, hit escape to cancel that. And that way I can, instead of just extruding them backwards, I can hit Alt S, scale them along the normals and bring that out. And just make a little plate there. And maybe that's a little bit too much. It's a bit too big. So what I will do instead is select this face. And I want to pull it down in such a way that it's not messing up any of these angles here. So I will turn my pivot point, or not my pivot point, my orientation to normal. So it's pointing in the same direction as that face. Pull that down. Same thing here. I will select that face, pull that up, like so, and maybe it can be a little bit more thin. So I will select that top face, hold Control, select the bottom one. There we go. I think that looks a little bit better. And I also want to add a little bit more detail to this because it seems a little bit boring here in the front. It's too flat. So I will add one more inset that kind of runs through the center here. Let's add an edge loop. Pull this in. And let's see. Let's select this face here in the back. That one and that one. Hit E to extrude. Left click to cancel the movement. It's still extruded, just lying on top. And then Alt S, scale this in along the normals like so. So now we just need to make sure that once we did that Alt S, things got a little bit tilted. So I will hit S, Y, and 0 to scale that in to be completely flat. And similarly here, I'll hit S, Z, and 0 to make that completely flat. And then the rest of these we can just kind of eyeball. Let's turn this back to global. Some people model with this just completely off. You can turn off your navigate gizmo or just use a different tool. But for some reason I've got so used to it that I just can't. Alright, let's see what that looks like. I think that is much more interesting, though this should line up. Let's select all of these guys. I'm holding Control to lasso select. Move this along the x-axis, snap that up. Okay, that's looking cool. Though I don't want it to go all the way down to the bottom there, so I will add another edge loop here. And then take this face. This is going to be kind of messy, but oh well. E to extrude, snap this up. Take this edge, snap that over there, select everything. Control V, remove double vertices, and then make extra sure that we go in and delete any of these other things that we don't need, like those vertices there. There we go. And I think this gives us a more interesting shape, and it looks like those didn't snap quite right. So let's hold Control, snap that right on top. Control V, remove doubles. There we go. And then if we want to change exactly where this is, then we can move this along its normal. I want to make that cut a little bit deeper. Though it looks like it's not exactly parallel, which is a bummer. Or perpendicular, I mean. Okay, so with that, I think we're looking good, though if we look right through this tank, it's very awkward that the main portion of this is just kind of sitting on nothing, like it's just empty in there. So let's also add in 2 edge loops, like so. Let's select each of these individually, Alt-select the edge loop, S, Y, and 0. Select this one, S, Y, 0. Select this face, E to extrude, snap that up to the top. Delete these faces that we created in the middle, like so. And then again, Control V and remove doubles. So once we have that, we can move this guy back and move this guy forward, and we should be set. So the very last thing that I will do, oh, looks like we need to mirror this guy. I may as well select this one and then Shift select these boxes here on the front, and then Control J to join them. Looks like we will need to turn on Auto Smooth again. But once we do that, then it'll just become part of that object and will be mirrored right along with them. Okay, so the last thing that I want to do is make sure that when I rotate the tank barrel that nothing goes haywire. I think the first time that I tried this, I made this a little bit too short, and so, once it rotated around, it ended up hitting the main body of the tank. So I want to make sure that nothing like that happens. So I will select all of the top pieces here, shift select the main part that's going to rotate, hit Control P and parent to object. That way, when I rotate this, everything else will rotate as well, though of course that's not the right pivot point. So then what I will do is select both of these vertices in edit mode along that center line, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then I will go to Object, Transform, and Origin to 3D Cursor. And that really messed up the parenting. So really quickly, let's select all of these. Alt-P, clear parenting, keep transformation, Object, Transform, Origin to 3D Cursor. And that looks like it rotates pretty well. It doesn't feel like it's the exact center. It's the exact center of this line here, but it looks like from the top it should be rotating around this line here. So instead, let's use the top, Shift S, cursor to selected, Object, Transform, Origin to 3D Cursor. There we go. And we can also change this hatch to be a little bit closer to that, so that it looks like it's rotating around there. And then let's select these guys, Shift P, set parent to object, keep transform, rotate along the Z, and we just need to make sure that as we rotate this around, it still looks cool, and I believe that it does. Sideways, here's one example where it looks a little bit weird. So let's pull this forward a little bit, just to give that a little bit more margin so that it looks like it's on purpose. And then, we can rotate this however we want. And then once we're done, we just need to hit Alt-R and clear that rotation, and we should be set. And so that's it for the basic modeling of the tank.